All right, here we are. The Innovation and Learning Series number 10, formerly the iPad Exchange. New and improved name today. We have a special guest today, Dr. Justin Bathon, who is the Director of Innovative Schools at University of Kentucky. Let's start by introducing ourselves. I'll go first. Ben Sheridan. I'm a PhD student at the University of Kentucky. I work here at the university as well as an instructional designer. Let's start with, I'll go across the bottom and ask Diana to start.
I'm Diana Viva. I'm a learning innovation coach at Shekel International School in Shenzhen, China.
Excellent. Douglas.
Douglas Irish. I'm here at ASM, the technology coordinator for the school.
Excellent, thanks. Gary.
Gary Coyle, Director of Technology at the American Embassy School in New Delhi.
All right, Justin.
Oh, me? Righto. I'm Justin Bathon. I'm a professor of education leadership at the University of Kentucky and a co-director of STEAM Academy in Lexington. We'll talk more about that.
Great. Marcello.
Marcello Mongardi. I'm the middle school technology integration coach at the American International School in Muscat in Oman, TASM.
Excellent. Maureen.
Maureen Cullen. I'm the middle school technology coordinator at the American Embassy School in New Delhi.
Sean.
Yep, and I'm representing a bit of Southeast Asia down in Singapore. I'm at the Singapore American School, and I'm a technology coach with the elementary school.
Excellent. So for those just joining us or who have not had a chance to watch one of our episodes before, we get together about once a month or sometimes once every 2 months to talk about innovation and learning and kind of that space where they intersect. So we have a Google Plus page and a Google Plus community, and we have a hashtag that is, what is it, Marcello?
Capital I-L series.
Capital I-L series. Excellent. So you can, Marcello's going to be watching that hashtag, right? So if people have questions or comments, they can just use that hashtag and we'll try to address those. So, Justin, why don't you get us started by talking a little bit about what you've been doing here in Lexington at STEAM Academy for the last year and a half, year and 3/4.
Yeah, starting a new public school here in Lexington, Kentucky. We do not have charters in Kentucky, so it is a regularly functioning school. There's tons of details. I'm sure we'll get into a bunch of them. But generally, here in Kentucky, we are really interested in what's next for education. The whole world, of course, is interested in what that next step is. Kentucky has a great history of school reform. 20 years ago, Kentucky took one of the largest leaps forward of anyone else in the world, and we're actually quite globally known for such big steps forward in education reform 20 years ago. So now that 25 years have passed, it's time for that next big step. So the University of Kentucky, which is where I formally work, is really interested in helping to lead the state forward on that front. And in doing so, we pilot a ton of things, including hiring Ben Sheridan for a role in innovation here in the state. And then we took the next step this last 2 years ago of starting sort of our own school. So that's where we find ourselves today, which is 2 years in on starting a new school. And it's been a heck of an interesting experience, super challenging. We, though, have the mandate from the university to do sort of all of the reform at one time. We've been working with schools all over the state, and when we work with schools all over the state, we say, we want you to do one element of this sort of next model of teaching and learning that we think is coming, and then do that element really well, and then hopefully do the other elements later. But for our school, when we got started, we sort of needed to do an everything at once approach, which has been great because it allows us to set extremely high standards and bars for how much reform we're engaging in at one time, but also extremely challenging because we are trying to juggle a zillion different balls in the air at one time. So, Ben, what are some specifics you all want to know? Everyone always wants to know the basics. Right now we're at 240 kids. We'll run 600 kids at capacity at STEAM Academy. We're going to build a new building on UK's campus. In all likelihood, that process is finalizing right now. that should be ready to go in a couple of years. And then we have 44% free and reduced lunch, 44% minority population, and about 50% free and reduced lunch population. So we're...
Can you explain what that means?
Sure, for our non-U.S. folks. So free and reduced lunch for us in the U.S. just means high poverty. That is where the federal government gets involved and pays for kids' lunches because they're coming from a family background that can't afford to do that kind of stuff. So it just is it's a term that we use in the U.S. to talk about high poverty families. So we're a pretty diverse and high poverty school. It's part of our mandate. We're always going to serve that population. We like serving that population, but it certainly brings additional challenges to the table. So
cool. We had Mark join us. Mark, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, how's it going? I'm Mark McElroy, and I'm a high school E coach at Checo International School, the same school that Diane is from. I've been working here for quite a while. Hey, Diane, how are you? And glad to be joining the chat. Sorry to join late.
That's okay. And you have a friend.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Martin Rutan. I'm a e-coach as well.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us, guys. If you want to throw up your lower third while we're chatting, feel free. Okay, so let's talk about maybe innovation and the fact that Justin said they're trying to do everything at once. You know, I want to kind of hear other people's reactions to that, and you know, see how they're approaching sort of this idea of innovation and maybe bringing it in stages, or you know, what they're running up against when they're trying to innovate at their school. Who would like to go first?
Well, I have a question or an idea.
Yeah.
And it's kind of rare, I guess, for an organization to be just from scratch, kind of trying to be innovative across the board, right? Yeah. But there's a whole, I'm sure there's a whole spectrum of what people are dealing with as far as trying to be innovative. Like some people might be in a very conservative environment where innovation is tough. It's tough to get a toehold anywhere, and then most of us are somewhere in between there, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess you could speak to how do you get that innovative mindset in place right from the start? So Justin, is it in your case because it was from scratch? Was that top on your interview questions for new staff? I mean, your mission, was it all written that way, or how did it work? And then maybe other people can talk about how it is in their sort of place on the spectrum.
Yep. So for us, we definitely had an advantage being a from scratch school. That is absolutely part of our story, and it really helped us at the beginning. I do work with schools all over the state of Kentucky, and many schools are innovating in one front. There's many schools that are at a more conservative type of location, so innovation for them means taking these couple of steps in this direction, and that is potentially the most innovation that's possible in that school district at that time. So, you know, that they're innovating just as much as we are. I think that I don't feel like we're innovating more than anyone else. We are trying more alternatives. We're changing more things at one time, I would say, than others. So we don't have the best story in terms of our startup. I wish we did. We are a U.S. public school that serves a high needs population in a large urban district in the United States. So the startup was really fast and was not incredibly well thought out, I would say. I actually was not even involved at the very early stages of this school. I was brought in a little bit later. So we hired our first year out of speed and necessity. We just tried to get a staff in place as quickly as we could. Definitely not the right thing to do. I mean, we knew it at the time, but you know, school was starting in a couple weeks, and the school launched, and we needed to hire. So we did. Mistake. After year one, we turned over the entire core of the school's teachers, English, math, and science. We just replaced them all and hired in a whole new crew. Our second year of hiring, we did much better. We had a much clearer sense of the kinds of teachers that we needed, the kinds of personnel that we needed, and we interviewed for that. We also let our entire school community do the interviewing process, which may be normal in the international context, but here in the U.S., letting students and parents and the university, everyone contribute to the hiring process is pretty rare. And so that was another thing that we did that really helped, because we had kids on hand vetting the teachers for us while they were in the interviewing process. And the kids' feedback was very authentic, and I think really helped the parents understand what kids are looking for in a teacher much more clearly. So we did much better, and this year, you know, in our going into year 3 for us, I'm recruiting really heavily, which is another thing that schools in the U.S. do not do for the most part, which is actively recruit other teachers. There is always, you know, some behind-the-scenes stuff going on, but no really very marketing-driven recruiting. That's very rare for schools. So, you know, I'm hopeful in year 3 we're going to have even a stronger staff. But that startup from scratch has been awesome, because every year we are getting to basically turn over half the staff between bringing new folks in because the school's growing every year, and sort of the transitions of folks that don't fit as well. So that's been sort of our experience. I'm interested in what others have sort of gone through, is getting the right staff in place to really do whole school reform.
Yeah. So, what have people seen about, you know, what has changed over the last couple of years as schools have started to innovate, and, you know, with a more maybe, you know, teachers who want to stay and who want to learn more, but who just aren't really bringing those skills. Like, what do you see as like the how are we helping teachers to become innovators, I guess?
It's a good question, Dan. I wanted to ask quickly, Justin, just in regard to the having the kids with the interviews, is that for all positions that you have, and are they just, you have like a couple of days where you do your interviewing, or I'm just wondering about like a little bit of the mechanics of how that works.
Yeah, exactly that. We schedule up some days that we're going to have interviews happening, and we invite our entire community, including kids, to that process. And then, you know, we, as of now, last year, what I did not like, and we're going to change this upcoming year, is doing sort of group interviews, which is multiple candidates in the room at one time. It really lets them play off of each other. It lets you really see the comparisons between each of them. But I really, of course, want to go to a deeper level during that interview process, and that format didn't really allow for it. But there's very little that the administration is doing that kids are not participating in. We're really letting them be joint
Thank you, Santosh.
partners in this interview process. Ultimately, of course, the administration is making the choice. Our advisory board is making the choice. But we have students sitting on our advisory board too, so students are involved in the interviewing, then they're also involved in the final decision-making process as well. And of course, when I say students, it's not all 240 kids in the building. It is, you know, the 10 kids that are showing up to a lot of things. But at least it brings some student voice to that discussion, and also provides legitimacy back to our student population. When we get to introduce our new teachers the next year, we say, hey, this is, our whole community is invested in this new person. So it's been good. I mean, kids have done spectacularly well in those interviews. The best questions usually come from kids. Because they're the ones that have to deal with this, right? Like, we all are going to have relationships with these other adults, but the kids are the ones that are going to spend hours and hours a day with them. So they ask the best questions for sure.
Does anybody have another question? I have a question, but I'll hold on to it.
To kind of piggyback on that question.
Sure.
I have a question. I'm wondering about kind of taking on to that, the kids being involved in the interview process. You mentioned that then after a year you have this turnover because some of those teachers don't fit. What I'm wondering is, like, what process do you have in place to determine, whether or not they fit or not fit? Who's making that determination? Is it the students that are involved in that piece? How does that I guess evaluation process work, where you might say, okay, thank you for giving us a year, but
yeah,
maybe we need to split ways?
On it goes. Exactly, that happens. So we have some statewide evaluation procedures in place that we have to follow by law. Remember, we're not a charter school. We are a pure public school. We have some flexibility, but most of those state mandates we have to follow. So we, of course, use the state evaluation system. Kentucky has invested a lot in a more robust teacher evaluation system. And we also have student surveys of teacher effectiveness. So we're of course looking at the academic data. The academic data is very useful, but not rich. The richer data is our own experiences out in the classrooms, much more of a qualitative data set than the quantitative data set. And so it's really a coaching process. For the most part, teachers that don't fit with us know it early on, I'll say. And most of the time, and remember, we're only a couple years old, so my data set here is less than 10. But teachers, of course, they have options. If you're a pretty good teacher in a traditional system, you can always jump back into a new position. Fayette County or Lexington schools are very large, so your ability to transfer is pretty high. So for the most part, the teachers that we would say don't fit well, they self-select out of STEAM, which is great. So that's the majority of the hard work is done on their own. That's not to say we haven't had to have the hard conversation. We have. We may have to again this year. So that is a process that is more difficult. There has legal implications. I think that what we have is an administrative team that comes together and discusses where we think each of the teachers is going, how much growth we have seen in the teacher over the course of the year, because no teacher is going to fit our model from day one. It's that different than the traditional schools in this area. So all teachers are going to have to grow into the model. The question is how much growth is happening, and is that a growth trajectory that we think is going to work for us over time. And so we get together this time of year, have those discussions. Ultimately, the advisory board gives some of their feedback as well, and then the school principal executes the decision. So it happens. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting just to hear, as I hear you talking, I'm thinking, sort of, you mentioned culture a couple times, and how culture kind of drives who fits or who doesn't, and who's kind of working to set that culture.
Yeah.
And who's allowing that culture to sort of continue, or that shift towards a more, innovative, but I think any teacher has to grow because there's just so much changing right now in education.
Yeah. I will say the other part of my job is I am an educational attorney, and schools don't fire teachers nearly enough. The law, everyone looks at the law as this huge barrier to teacher transitions, whether that is moving to a different school in the district or just losing their job. It's not the massive barrier that it would be made out to be. In the U.S., we have a very strong teacher union context. In Kentucky, not as much, but we do. But in the private school world that you all work in, I mean, you all have the ability to transition teachers quickly. And I think that education does not nearly transition teachers enough. Not everyone is going to fit with every school, and we shouldn't try to force that fit. If it's not a good fit, it's best for both of us to move on. So,
yeah, and I think, Maureen, you bring up a really good point. You want to talk about that? Because that's what I'm thinking as well, as I hear him talking. So,
are you talking about how do you? My curiosity is really kind of, with this whole idea of innovation, is how do you create that culture or that environment in the school to promote teachers to be innovative in their teaching? What kind of professional development do you do? Is that what you're talking about, Ben?
Yeah, because I think you hit really on a really important thing there. It's like you can't just say, hey, it's time for you to be innovative. You have to say, how can I support you and provide you with what you need to be innovative? That is a huge component that a lot of people, I think, maybe don't talk about. When that is really what it's this. I think it's the school has a huge responsibility. If they're saying we want you to do this, how are they providing these opportunities for you to grow that way? So, and I think I'm going to tap these. We have a lot of tech coaches with us, and tech coordinators here, and so innovation is often defaulted to technology, which isn't always the case, but technology can be such a facilitator. So I'd love to hear from some of these guys about sort of this idea of how do you provide, what are you providing your teachers with to be innovative?
I think that the thing at SIS that happened is in the last couple of years is we really, I can't remember the name of the model, but basically you have your innovators, the people who are really ready to jump right in, the early adopters who just need a little bit of guidance and support. They're on, they're ready to try things, and so kind of looking at the way the innovators are just going to go and looking at the early adopters and working with them and supporting them. I mean, we have 3 e-coaches at our school. The admin's on board. I think we've created a very a positive climate of trust, and try these things. Let's go. Let's document what works, what doesn't. So I think it's a combination of really taking your staff and what they're ready to do, and then also making sure you have that environment of trust, and that it's okay to try things out, then you're really going to struggle.
All right, who else wants to? I saw some other people.
I think we use the word culture, about like shifting the culture, which I think is what it's about, right? Or if you want it to be organic and genuine, you need to shift the culture. And I think that can be a really difficult thing to do. And a crucial part of it needs to be modeling from administration, I would imagine. A celebration of innovation and urging people to innovate, to take risks, to show that risk-taking is something that is part of the culture of your organization. And then teachers within a staff are more willing to engage in the same sort of risk-taking, knowing that it involves failure, and that's part of the culture. That's part of what administration is expecting of you, is to perhaps fail, but to break new ground in doing so, and then that goes all the way down.
I think the other thing, too, that plays into it is the whole way that we evaluate teachers and their performance. Typically, in international schools, they tend to be more traditional models of evaluation, and so that in and of itself limits the ability for teachers to innovate.
Yeah, that's one of the things, Gary, that hearing you talk, it's, touring the state of Kentucky last fall, with Justin and some other people, and going into these schools and talking to these teachers, it's no matter where you go, teachers are kind of the same. They're awesome. They want to do cool stuff. They love kids, but then at the end of the day, they're just like, well, I'm so defined by the scores my kids get on these tests, you know, and it's like, it's such like a, you know, there's one thing that counts and that's it, you know, so it's kind of this culture of fear a little bit in driving, you know, what they do every day, and it's interesting, you know, that you mentioned that.
You know, I think too, you know, we have the luxury in most international schools of not being bound by, you know, the FCAT or, you know, a certain score on that high stakes standardized test. So, you know, that can be liberating, but at the same time, you know, I think for whatever reason, teachers tend to, even though they may want to innovate, oftentimes will, you know, take the safer route, so to speak.
You know, it's interesting. You know, as we're talking, I see some of the comments here, and we're talking about scheduling, and I'm wondering, you know, and also what I've seen is a big shift lately towards project-based learning and authentic assessment. So when you change so much, like Justin said, they were changing so much that you really can't just point to one thing and say, well, we're doing it the way we've always done it, and I'm going to get the same results. Because if you change the entire schedule and you change the way your classroom runs and the kind of assessments you use, you can't really do things as you've done them. So what do you guys see happening like within your schools? Is there any move in that sort of direction with you know, project-based learning or authentic assessments or any sort of push in that direction?
I think Mark can speak more to it, but at the secondary, looking at some scheduling options. They've incorporated a ed kind of genes hour into advisory, so they're looking at, as a school at the secondary level, looking at some options and how we might play with scheduling.
I think one of the big things that that push has led to is we're trying to create that culture where I think kids feel confident enough that they're going to do a project and they're not necessarily going to be assessed on it right away, and the assessments, what we're looking at, and content sort of markers that may come from it, that comes later. And really it's more about the fact they're in charge of their own learning. I think that leads to, of course, we're talking about gathering data. You have parents that are going, well, what are they learning? I mean, how can you guarantee how can you guarantee they're learning anything? And that, I think that's the next step, is changing the culture of, well, and we know how you guys went to school. I know how I went to school. School's changing. We have the ability to really make an impact on experiences that kids come out. It shouldn't be that we're forcing kids to do the exact same thing that every other kid does. I mean, that's where technology really helps, is because technology, you know, offers that ability to really easily differentiate what projects kids do. And the innovation part is the fact that now we're just changing how that traditional class should look. Now the next step is convincing parents that their kids are learning.
That's such a great point, and this will be the last thing I'll say. I need to take off, but you know, one thing that I've discovered as I've moved into, you know, this role is that the pushback from the parent community isn't always obvious to everyone. But in international schools, there's this concern about, you know, if my child is only going to be here 2 years, what's their transition to the next school going to look like, especially if, you know, they're, you know, spending time on 20% time or, you know, other things that are truly progressive in nature. And so, you know, that parent education piece is so important, especially in that transient community. I look forward to hearing the rest of the hangout, and you know, thanks for the shift with this, Marcello and Ben. Nice job, guys.
See ya. Thanks, Gary.
Right.
I think I think what we were talking about a second ago with parents and their view of how teaching is. I remember being at Teachers College and one of the lecturers talking about the fact that one of the biggest traps for teachers is that you end up teaching the way you were taught. And I think it is like it's a perpetual cycle, and breaking out of that is very difficult. Our school visited some schools in New Zealand, Hobsonville Point and Stonefields. They're both public schools, but what they're doing is they're working on changing the assessment techniques to being learning progressions where the students themselves are actually, they keep track of what they have achieved and what they haven't achieved. And then they basically have like sign-up lessons. So, for instance, if you're looking at your math outcomes and you say, for instance, you don't know how to add fractions, and then there's a fraction workshop at school, then you sign up for that one and you go and do it, and then you're able to sign it off in your thing. So effectively, like, the kids are basically writing their own assessments throughout the year. The parents have access to this the whole time, and so they're really fundamentally changing the way they're delivering the curriculum, as well as how they're reporting back to parents, because the parents are kind of in the loop. If they want to be, they're in the loop the whole time. And I think that, like, sometimes I think, like, you know, people talk about, like, incremental change and, like, fundamental change, and it's the difference between having, like, a slide rule that moves really smoothly and then having a calculator. And I think we're still, like, in that kind of incremental change kind of part, and there's an opportunity, like, we really do have an opportunity to really change it, but there's a little bit of work to be done to get there. But I think there's some cool things, and, like, hearing Justin talk about what they're doing, particularly I think from like in a public system, like, it's great to see that happening, because I think in some ways the private system is going to lag a little behind, because I think parents have, like, bigger expectations and a far bigger influence on how things happen in that realm.
That's a good point, Sean.
So can I jump back in? Is that okay, Ben?
Yeah.
So as you all are talking and watching the chat on the side a little bit too, here's what I think is different about STEAM that I love, that gets me up in the morning every morning, that most schools are not doing, to Sean's point about incremental versus sort of disruptive change. What we have focused so heavily on at STEAM Academy, and Ben knows that I spend most of my time thinking about this, is changing the underlying model of school. You know, I think that the existing school structure, how school is defined in most people's heads, like parents and even kids, I mean, everyone has this expectation for the model of school. You know, the born-on date, as Ken Robinson would say, is one of the most important factors. So everyone has this predetermined model of what school is supposed to be, and you can, like, tweak that model, but for the most part, people expect you to stay pretty close to it. And what I love about the work we're doing at STEAM and a few other schools in Kentucky, and the discussion that's actually happening in Kentucky right now, is how do we change the underlying model of school so that teachers have the ability to innovate in ways they never would have thought possible. Because I think when I'm out visiting a lot of schools, you know, the innovation is within this pretty tightly defined context. You know, so innovation for you as a teacher in a traditional school might be, instead of using my 15 minutes for class to teach from the textbook or lecture or whatever, I'm going to use those 15 minutes to do a project, right? But if you don't change the underlying time model, then you're always sort of locked into these 15-minute class periods. So we at STEAM changed the underlying time model. You know, if you don't get to, if your school reform is not getting to the big things like money and time and staffing, even what is the meaning of a credit? You know, what when a kid finishes something, how do you define finishing? Then for me, you're just tweaking the existing model instead of really sort of innovating on the underlying structure itself. That's, for me, what is so exciting, and the work that I love and I'm super fascinated by. So we have, I know there's been some questions around scheduling. We free up entire days, and we just say, teachers, you own this day. We don't care what you do. It's your call. You have the whole day to deal with this. And that's 2 days a week. So 2 days out of 5 are at teachers' discretion to do whatever the heck they want to do. For us in the U.S., that's a major structural reform. I mean, most schools either run a 6-period day or they run a block schedule. That's your choice. You know, most schools choose from those 2 options. Very few schools in the U.S. come to the situation, go back to first principles and think, well, for these outcomes, how would it make sense to schedule time? And because we're a startup school, we've had that ability. It's been spectacular. But I think it takes schools like STEAM to show that other structural models can work, just as well, or maybe even better, for traditional schools that are pre-existing, been around for 50, 100 years, to get at the really hard questions like how do you allocate time. So that's been extremely difficult work because there's so many preconceptions you have to overcome when you think about this kind of stuff, but also extremely valuable because that is some of the best learning experiences have come from us changing the model of what is expected.
And you've held like town halls where you kind of educate the parents and.
Well, that's a key piece of learning is when you. So we started this new high school in Lexington, and so our communications plan. We looked at our communications plan, and our communications plan was similar to every other school's communication plan, every other high school's communication plan in Lexington. That is entirely inadequate in a massive change context. So that was we had to learn that one the hard way. We had the normal, like we send home weekly newsletters, that kind of stuff, the normal communication channels, and that didn't work. Parents were confused, outraged, what's going on? My kid is going to Harvard, so how do your credits, to the question of credits, how do the credits at STEAM get my kid into Harvard? Because parents have those expectations. So we have gone to a system now where we just have quarterly town halls. So we expect outrage, we're predicting outrage, and we are building systems to manage outrage. And it's not like we actually have spectacular parents, and all of the parents are along for the ride with us, and they love it, but there's so many deeply ingrained expectations on the part of parents, like my kid is going to Harvard, that if you mess with those expectations at all, they have a tendency to be really concerned. Freak out is not a great word, right? This is probably going to be watched by some of my parents. I'm sure I'll hear that. But they do have a tendency to hammer us on the communications front when we try to change structural elements without doing a ton of communication. So.
But fair enough, though, right? I mean, from their point of view, I mean, you're making all these changes, and I know you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing, but they don't know you from Adam so much. So I mean, it's and they know what they know. They know what they've done. So
Yep.
I think the education part is pretty huge.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
questions from other people.
Well, I'm thinking about what Sean talked about teaching the way you were taught, and it makes me think that a lot of this, perhaps not outrage, but pushback, we talk about in the context of parents, you could experience in the context of existing staff at a school if you're trying to innovate and that's not a strong part of the culture. You might experience a similar pushback. People have curriculum to deliver, people have taught the way they've taught for years and years, and you're asking, it's a big ask to get them to, it's a bit of a leap of faith. You're asking them, we're going to teach this completely differently, and the students are going to experience this completely differently, but trust me, they'll be okay. And you do get pushback from that, and it's kind of a similar set of things you're dealing with. And education is at the root of that as well, I guess.
Yep.
I think the teacher. Oh, sorry. I think teachers are. We still are producing teachers somehow in education tools that are. We need to be the masters of our content, and we need to have the content, and we deliver this content, and this is what we do. And I think that needs to change. I think you're seeing that in schools that are innovative and teachers who are innovative, but also it takes a special combination of, I think, educators in a certain area to when you run those project-based learning programs, that you can look at what a kid is doing, what a student, that journey that they're taking, and be able to apply those benchmarks or those learning things that you want them to do and say, look, as they're taking apart a bicycle and re-putting it back together, they get the design element, they get the physics behind it, they're getting geometry behind it. You need to be able to identify those areas, and I think that's where you need the right teachers to be able to say, I will step back and I don't need to force feed you curriculum and content. I need to be able to see what you're doing and try to guide you in the way. Here's the content that you're getting out of it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To your point of leap of faith, that's how early on we know the teachers that are going to work for us or not. You know, if you're going to take the leap of faith, even if it's small and your growth is slow, we're going to stick with you in all likelihood. You know, that's the teacher that's going to work for us at STEAM. But there are certainly teachers that will not take the leap of faith, that are very tied to teaching and learning the way it is. And remember, our existing model of public education for us in the U.S. is not bad. I mean, Fareed Zakaria and others have written that, you know, the U.S. education system is at the root of what has made the U.S. what it is today. So it's not like it is a really bad education system. So, you know, there's some argument that not taking the leap of faith to change that model is not the wrong approach. But for us, I mean, we're just clear with both teachers and parents right at the beginning. We're different. If you don't want different, there's other options. Don't come here. You know, so, and we have Take a Tour Wednesday. Every Wednesday we have tourists in the building, you know, middle school kids that are thinking about coming to STEAM, or other people from around the state or the country that are coming to look at what we're doing. And I tried to tell every parent that either you are interested and you want to have something different for your kid, or if you really want to hold to the traditional system, which winds up working decently for most kids, go for that. It's not a problem. I don't feel offended when people don't want to try something different. So, but we're a big enough city, Lexington's a big enough city, that there is a market for different in the public school space. So we still have plenty of kids applying to come to STEAM. So far it works, but I don't know, it could fall apart any day.
So, you know, as you guys are hearing this, what do you see as, you know, we all have those teachers or no, yeah, design days. I'll get to that next. What do you see as if you could pinpoint a common attribute to those teachers who are innovators and who are taking that leap of faith? Can you point to one maybe or two sort of, you know, things that if you were interviewing new teachers, you could ask them a question, or, you know, you could ask for an example of something that would sort of give you insight into that sort of teacher? Because we all work with these people.
I think a big thing is that they learn themselves. They're lifelong learners, and they want to continue to learn and grow as well. And so I think that's an important quality or characteristic that I've seen the teachers who no matter if they're just out of university or they're, you know, a veteran teacher, you see that desire to learn more, and when given the opportunity, they will take advantage of it.
How important do you guys think that a network is to being an innovative teacher?
You know, I watched a thing about creativity the other day, and they talked about whether creativity is innate or it's developed. And I was saying basically that one of the main outcomes was that creativity is enhanced by the community in which you're in. And that, like, oftentimes creatives like group together and they feed off each other. And that's what I think what Justin talked about earlier is, like, more than anything, I think you need to build that the community of, like, risk takers and people who want to try things at school, more than necessarily getting the individuals in, is getting an open sort of dialogue about what works and what doesn't. I kind of think, like, one of the questions you could ask someone is, like, tell me about a lesson that bombed recently. Because I think when people, like, are taking risks and doing things, that's when, like, things fall apart, and it's a funny story, but they get up and, like, they go and do something else the next day. But I do think that the community side of things, I think that's a really important part of it.
We experience failure frequently. It's not fun when it happens. Our latest Design Day challenge, I put photos of the Design Day that was a spectacular success. I haven't put up photos of, I didn't link you up to the photos last week of our Design Day challenge, which did not go very well. And so that is a normal occurrence, and the kids tell us immediately, you know, you do create this culture of innovation, and everyone's living it at the same time, so all kids are willing to let us try things, but when it doesn't work, they tell us right away. So like there's not a lot of going back and having to really analyze the data, did this work or not work. The kids are very upfront. They're like, no, this was useless. Don't do that again. So it's good. I mean, that's the way we want that openness on their part. We want them to be actively evaluating and contributing to the things that we're doing. So I agree with you. A teacher should be able to state a project that failed miserably. That would definitely be something that all teachers in our model would be able to tell you, because things are going to fail. It's just part of the model.
Justin, do you like those design day projects? Do your kids have input on those? Is there a process that how those are suggested? Do you find one works better than the other?
Sounds very democratic, very much like the Sudbury Valley School in Michigan, or not Michigan, sorry, Massachusetts, where it's a democratic school where the kids are also sit down with the board and they decide what the curriculum is going to be.
Yeah, and not all kids. You know, like I said earlier, there's a group of kids in the building that are very active co-designers with us of the school. There's a lot of kids that are very comfortable to take the ride. You know, they don't actively want to participate. I wish they would. I wish more would, and it's something we try to push for. So those design days, yeah, we try to do about 4 big projects per semester, something like that. And for us, design days are Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So every Tuesday and Wednesday is a potential design day. And what the administration has told the teachers is that you can take any Tuesday and Wednesday that you want during any week and run any project. We can run that project school-wide. We can run that project for just one class, or we can run it for just the sophomores as a group, something like that. So we have really turned over total flexibility of 2 of the 5 days per week, and really we're willing to do more, but 2 at the moment is more than they can handle. I will say that I was shocked. Another piece of learning was last year when we did this, we turned over time to teachers. We turned over everything to teachers. We're like, these are your days, you own them. The first thing that they did was put the block schedule back in. You know, so that was like, what the? We could have done that. What? So you know, it just tells you though how much everyone needs help and guidance in this process, because when teachers, they've never had that option to control time at that level before, and when they're faced with the challenge of how do you manage hundreds of kids over the course of a day, they're going to naturally fall back into what has worked in the past. And so we had to coach out of that, and now we're doing much better. We're getting strong at it. Teachers are emerging that really understand how to manage time at a large scale, and you know, I'm sure other schools will recruit those teachers away from us. I won't tell you which ones they are, but we're getting better. But we have a long way to go, so I don't want anyone to think like we're a great school yet. We're just learning.
Cool. We probably have time for maybe one more question or one more nugget of wisdom if you guys want to share. Who's got one? Going once. Going. Marcello, you look pensive there.
Well, if you hadn't called it a nugget of wisdom, I'd have said something, but now that pressure.
Yeah.
You know what I'd like is just to rewind, Justin, and just give a complete, clear kind of definition, description of a design day.
Okay. So we are big into the design thinking process. Another one of the professors here is John Nash, who in the world of educational design thinking is a big player. Design thinking does not work perfectly when run at scale. So design days have translated to us as days for entirely flexible scheduling and teacher allocation, It's the days that we really try to get out of the building as much as we can. Ultimately, design days for us are 2 days a week that we are willing to try anything. And we use the design thinking process more as cover, more than anything, to sort of give us the freedom to try anything on some days. So, that's why we're sort of basing it in a design thinking process. And it's not, we definitely use the design thinking process. I mean, we're big on ideation and interviewing and all the sort of things that emerge from that process. We're very big on all that in our projects. But we really just wanted to take all the rules off for a while and see what happened, and be very project driven instead of textbook or curricular driven. We're a paperless school. We have no textbooks. That's not by choice. That was by necessity. The district did not fund a textbook budget for us, so we had to learn how to be one-to-one quickly because we didn't have a choice. So
the kids right on the other 3 days, do they see a whole variety of teachers and?
Yeah.
But on design days, they come in, and what happens with them? I mean, are they
mostly they'll be with their advisory teacher. That's our experience is showing to us that we run an advisory. A lot of schools are doing it nowadays, where a single teacher is responsible for kids throughout their entire high school experience. And inside an advisory, there's a mixture of grade levels. There's just a mixture of kids that are all peer mentoring. The teacher is mentoring. So you have this advisory group, which is sort of your home base. It's homeroom that's drastically scaled up. So advisory serves as our main mechanism during design days, and mostly you're doing projects with your advisory teacher. So teachers in the whole building or across an entire grade level are working together, teaching curriculum beyond science or whatever their specialty is. We're all agreeing on design days to teach this curriculum, even if it's not your specialty, as the advisory teacher. So that's how kids manage time. Then we come into and out of large groups, small groups, pulling apart. The advisory teachers are the ones that they'll make the decision, like, do we want to be in a classroom today, or do we want to be outside, or do we want to go somewhere else? I don't know, whatever. Advisory teacher's in charge of that. So that's how we're managing students and time, is using.
Sure. Well, and that's, you talk about the design thinking process, and it's a user-centered design, and if you think who is the user of the school, most people, stop at the teacher, but it's actually the kid, the kids that are in. They're the receivers of the product, so, keeping them in the design process is crucial. Mm-hmm. All right, well, I think that's just about, we got about 1 minute. Anybody want to say one last thing?
I'll just say it's been awesome. And I love working with all of you all. The international school market is some of the most interesting. Ben and I have just chatted for hours and hours about what's going on in the international school market. And getting to visit with you guys whenever I can. Marcello, you're in Muscat. I think that is NISA. We have a new partnership emerging with NISA, so I'm interested to see if I can get there soon.
Awesome.
But you all are doing great work, and whether you know it or not, you're serving as models for public schools all over the world. So I just want to say thanks to you guys for pushing boundaries that we struggle to push in the public school market, in the U.S. at least. So
awesome.
Happy to come back to that. Ben and I hang out all the time, so I'm sure I'll join again.
Awesome. All right, everybody,
Thanks,
awesome to see you guys. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ben.